A busy week to review here. We have arbitration deadline on Thursday. We're going to talk about the implications that has on players and, of course, the Tigers. I'll talk about Skubal, Brieske, some other players in there. We're going to give our daily, at this point, Bregman and Sasaki updates, and then talk about Verlander going to San Francisco. That and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, January 10th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Friday. Hopefully we'll send you off into the weekend here with a nice show. We are going to talk about the week that was. We obviously had on Wednesday, we did our, Zips projections, talks about the Fangraphs number projections, but this week was not quiet. It wasn't super busy in Tigers land. We're not here talking about a big splash signing or any trades or anything, but there was a lot of little stuff that kind of added up. We are going to talk about Verlander to San Francisco and all the fans that are upset that we chose Cobb over Verlander for the same price and whatnot. We'll get to that at the end of the episode. We're going to do Bregman. There's another update involving him, as there seems to be every day. We're going to talk about Sasaki. There seems to be another update for him every day as well. But a bulk of the episode is going to be about the arbitration deadline on Thursday afternoon. Now, I am recording this at 7. I have several hours of work to do for the Detroit News later this evening and playoff football to watch, college playoff football to watch. So I have not heard anything on Brieske. That's the one player who I tried to wait it out as long as I could. And this is my deadline, 7 p.m. Thursday night. So if it does come out later on Thursday night or Friday morning before you listen to this, that Brieske, did agree to a contract with the Tigers by the Thursday deadline, and it just took a while to get reported, which does happen sometimes. They're still reporting numbers now, even this late into the evening, even though the deadline was earlier in the afternoon. So I'll kind of lay this all out for you, but I just wanted to out front be like, hey, Brieske hasn't signed yet. We'll talk about that a little bit more and what that could mean down the road. It's not a big deal either way. But the arbitration deadline on Thursday essentially was this is the last day that you could sign a player that is arbitration eligible to a contract for 2025 and avoid going to arbitration with them. Arbitration hearings start at the end of January. So this was a very active day, Thursday was, and we will talk about kind of the bigger storylines from around the league involving the arbitration deadline as well, but we're obviously going to start with your Detroit Tigers. Tarik Skubal makes $10.15 million on a one-year deal. These are all one-year deals. It goes kind of without saying, but just in case. Casey Mize, $2.3 million. Jake Rogers, $2.64 million. Will Vest, $1.44 million. Zach McKinstry, $1.65 million, but that was a long time ago. They agreed to that number back in November. Jason Foley, $3.15 million. Matt Vierling, $3.005 million. And Andy Ibanez, $1.4 million, but that was also back in November around when Zach McKinstry signed his contract. Now, again, the only player that hasn't at the time of this recording is Brieske. We'll talk about that later. For the players that we do have numbers on, really the only noteworthy thing here is Tarik Skubal getting a massive raise. That's really the only storyline to watch here. Like Casey Mize, for as frustrated as some parts of the fan base are with him, was always going to get a contract here. Now, it's nice to see them iron this out now and not have what happened last year, which was a whole saga where we were like, he might go to arbitration? Is he not going to go to arbitration? Are they really going to go to ARB over what it was like $1 million? Not even, it was like 500K or something like that. Which I guess, is a lot of money, but relatively speaking, seems like a wild thing to go to arbitration over. So it's nice to see this year that they kind of got out ahead of it and just got a deal done. And there's no drama or anything. Jake Rogers always was going to, like everybody else, like it's self-explanatory. Like they weren't non-tendered. They were always going to get deals done. It was just a matter of whether they were all going to go to arbitration or not. Each of them was going to go to arbitration or not. The biggest thing that I want to reiterate here is that you never want to go to arbitration. I think if there is any example I can point to really drive that home, it is Corbin Burns. And that's something that I know Evan Petzold has talked about recently. I know MLB Trade Rumors talked about it. CBS Sports wrote an article about that, and this year, no, right? He signed a big deal and is going to go play for the Diamondbacks. Good for him. But, with that breakup from Milwaukee was really ugly. And a lot of it had to do with arbitration. A lot of it had to do with the fact that he was getting shortchanged what he was worth pretty comfortably and wasn't getting the raises that he wanted to get. And going to arbitration is what ended up happening was it his last year in Milwaukee or his first year in Baltimore? One of the last like 3-ish years, he did go to arbitration, and it was not good because the situation that you are put in when you go to an arbitration hearing is wild out of context, right? I've said this before on air, but I'm going to repeat myself now. So if you're an everydayer and you've heard this before, I apologize. But like, imagine for your job, whatever you do, okay, what does not matter. Imagine for your job, every year at the top of the fiscal or calendar year, whatever your job operates under, you have to go and sit in a room where it's you, a third-party arbitrator that does not work for you or even knows your industry, sure, but like is not a part of your day-to-day life. You don't know this person. And then your direct boss that literally writes your paychecks. And you are arguing to this arbitrator with the person that pays you about why you should get paid more money than you do, and your direct superior in front of you is telling this arbitrator why you aren't worth what you think you're worth, and you're actually worth this much less amount of money and this much fewer salary, and why they are in the right and why you are not actually that good at your job. Can you see why people want to avoid arbitration at kind of all costs? It is a wild concept outside of the scope of baseball. So I am glad that they avoided I guess Bo Brieske is still a question mark here. I want to talk about Skubal, then we'll get to Bo. As in terms of the raise, he gets over $10 million for this upcoming season. That's fantastic for him. That's like an $8 million raise. I think he was making a little over $2 this past season. So good for him. That is one of the biggest raises in the sport, which I think also bodes well. Look, I understand that a lot of people look at this and are like, we need a long-term extension. I agree with you. I just did my New Year's resolution show, whatever that was, last week, and talked about how much I wanted the Tigers to extend Tarik Skubal. The fact of the matter is, he's a Boras client. Boras notoriously does not sign contract extensions before his players hit the open market. And on top of that, you are again literally talking about a guy who might be the best pitcher in baseball and isn't that old. So I know, and I want an extension too, but this is not like every time people see this, when this notification went out and they're like, oh, Tarik Skubal's on, all the Tigers fans were like, oh, that's not a contract extent. Like, okay, I agree with you, but like this also had to happen, right? Like this doesn't mean that they're not still talking about contract extensions. This doesn't mean anything really in terms of that. This is a completely separate entity. We have to split these up in our brains, okay? So it doesn't affect that whatsoever. If anything, it's a positive light to be shed on because he is getting percentage-wise, one of the biggest raises in the entire sport for players that are arbitration eligible. And even if you look among like recent history, he's getting a huge raise, which presumably will be good for player team negotiations and that relationship going forward. That's the hope. Is that the reality? I don't know. I don't know Scott Boras. Unfortunately, my last name is Bentley, not Boras. I'm not sure if if Skubal and Boras are gonna be like, oh well, 2 years ago they gave you a big raise during arbitration, so like sure we'll shave off $10 million here, but it doesn't hurt either, and they have the money, and it's not going to affect their aggressiveness or how much they have in their budget for free agents still the rest of this offseason. This is at worst a net neutral thing and at best a good thing. Let's talk about Bo Brieske. Only going to spend a little bit of time on it because I'm not sure if it's just a report that's taking a long time to get to the general public or if he didn't come to a conclusion there, but we will talk about that and more right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at Game Time. I love going to live events, sports, music, theater, comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a Tigers game this past season. Also, a little bit more recently, went to a couple of great comedy shows already this fall and now winter, and used Game Time for all of them. It has made my life so much easier, and the excitement at the places was truly unforgettable. Game Time has made it easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, was looking for a ticket to a Pistons game, as I've talked about a lot. Did finally get that deal done and used Game Time to do so. Use the Game Time app. There's a great feature there called Game Time Picks where you find amazing deals and could even see the view of my seat before I bought it. The super deal was particularly impressive. That is what I ended up using. It's great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app has an all-in pricing feature, so when I bought it, I had my entire total up front. There were no surprise fees at checkouts like a lot of other places do. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shots to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we recap any happenings over the weekend for your Detroit Tigers. Today, we are talking about the arbitration deadline here first. Then we'll get into, Bregman, free agency, Verlander, more. Let's talk about the biggest stories from kind of around the league with this arbitration deadline. I think, and again, these are all still fluid. Like I just got a notification right now that Alejandro Kirk, they got a deal done in time with the Blue Jays, and like Jonah Heim got a deal done in time with the Rangers. Like this is fluid, and this list that I have here of kind of notable players that didn't get a deal done with their team could be different by the time you're listening to it. So keep that in mind. But Jarren Duran is kind of a big one if that is holding. He had a fantastic year this year, like got MVP votes, really took that step forward, was a really solid defender, hit really well, was a leadoff hitter for the Red Sox for most of the season. That one's going to be a really big deal if that ends up going to arbitration, because that's a guy that could be on a path to like being a legitimate, consistent all-star level player like he was in 2024. So something to keep an eye out there for sure. Brendan Donovan for the Cardinals, another interesting one. just because I really like Brendan Donovan and I think he would fit in to what the Tigers are trying to do really, really well. He's been on my wish list for the Tigers for a couple of years now. But that'll be kind of intriguing just because the Cardinals have been such a, I don't want to say a mess, like it's still the Cardinals, but they have certainly not been the Cardinals that they have been for my entire life the last 2 calendar years. So something to keep an eye out there for there. Lars Nootbaar, Cardinals as well. Makes me think that maybe just the Cardinals are slow in reporting theirs, but 2 names to keep an eye out for. Lars had a little bit of a down year this year, but had a hot streak there. I think at the start of the second half of the season, I want to say is when it was. And 2 years ago was a really solid player. Taylor Walls for the Rays, Michael King for the Padres, Andre Palante for the Cardinals as well. Luis Rengifo, that'll be an interesting one just because the Angels have, like they did come to an agreement with Taylor Ward, who's going to be one of their better players this year, is one of the more underrated players in the American League, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Rengifo there. Johan Oviedo for the Pirates. And who else? This is CBS Sports did a great article, so you can go read their list and kind of break down everybody and all the teams and whatnot. Dennis Santana of the Pirates, another player that notable player that did not come to terms, at least not reported to have come to terms yet. So we'll see what happens with all of those guys, but I think the biggest one is pretty comfortably Jarren Duran if that ends up holding and being the case. Other news, speaking of the Cardinals, actually, the Detroit Tigers' recent waiver claim, Bailey Horn, was claimed off of waivers by the St. Louis Cardinals on Thursday. So this is a guy that was claimed, I believe, off of waivers from the Red Sox back in November, maybe early December, and got DFA'd when the Tigers signed Gleyber Torres and now is a part of the Cardinals organization. So Bailey Horn, Tigers legend, never allowed an earned run, but did not even make it through the same offseason he was claimed, wishing him the best, but will be a member of the St. Louis Cardinals organization, does not clear waivers there. Let's talk about Alex Bregman. I'm going to keep this short. I'm tired of doing, entire shows dedicated to Bregman and what's happening there. I have a small update here. We're going to talk Arenado. We're going to talk Sasaki. We're going to talk Verlander. Okay. We'll do all of that right after this. Got to talk to you all today about our friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need to place live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. So, look, the only update here is just that there was a national kind of report. I know that Heyman had an update about it. A few other writers got a hold of the update too and kind of echoed similar thoughts. It really does sound like currently that it's Red Sox or Tigers for Bregman. And that's great to be down to the last 2. It's just how much stock are we going to keep taking in this? Like and that, again, this comes from an impatience frustration. Like, I understand from a baseball perspective, like, who cares how long it takes, right? I completely get that. But it's just every day it's like the report changes. Like, how long is that going to be true? That's great on January 9th, January 10th, that the Tigers and Red Sox are the final 2. There's nothing that says a new report is going to come on Sunday that says the Mets have offered him $250 million and like the Dodgers are now thinking about Bregman, or the Astros are like, I think they're probably done and moved on. But like, you know what I mean? Like these have shelf lives, these reports. This is not like, there's no rule that says this has to be the permanent outlook like going forward. There's no rule in the collective bargaining agreement of the sport that once it's reported, that's how it has to stay. Like, no, dude, like 3 other teams could come out of the woodwork and be interested in 24 hours. Who knows? So That's great. And I hope I've been pretty vocal about the fact that I would want the Tigers to get Bregman. I'm pro that move. But like I'm not going to spend, like 2 or 3 segments talking about these updates anymore. I'll throw them out there. We'll talk about them because it's relevant to everybody and everybody wants to hear them. But like I'm done, harping on these and really focusing on these for 10, 20 minutes at a time. Sasaki narrowed his list down to 6 teams, which the Tigers are not on. However, it's always something. However, there was also a report earlier this week out of Sasaki's agent and group that a mystery team, the infamous mystery team that is a part of pretty much every big negotiation ever, and is definitely not just an agent tactic to drive up prices and drive up interest. Totally not. Don't think that, because when was the last time a mystery team actually got a player? Oh, wait. Yeah, right. Definitely not a ploy by the agents. Good one. It works, but let's call it what it is. So a mystery team has reportedly met with Sasaki since he trimmed his list of teams down to 6 teams. So like, what do I do with that? Could it be the Tigers? Maybe. I don't know. I have no clue, dog. So like, if you want to hold out hope and hold on to any bit of hope or of, some remote possibility that he's going to be a Tiger, there it is. Just hope that we're the mystery team and that it's not just a complete scam by agents to get teams more interested so that they can be like, oh, hey, we got, I'd rather not say who, but somebody else is really interested in paying more money than you. This one, not financial, obviously. So yeah, there you go. There's your Sasaki update. I don't really have too much else to say on that either. There you go. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Blue Jays have settled on $28.5 million deal for 2025. I did not mention him earlier because it was kind of a foregone conclusion that they were going to avoid arbitration. It was just a matter of what the number was. So that's a big one. That is, I believe, the 3rd or 4th highest arbitration settlement ever. Or like out of court arbitration settlement ever. That is one of the biggest of all time. Juan Soto has the record at about 31 mil. So 28.5 would be one of the most expensive players that is arbitration eligible in the history of baseball. So good for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. We'll see what happens with him and the Blue Jays going forward. I do want to touch on Nolan Arenado for a second here as well. Don't have too much to say here either. I've been very vocal about this. I would not love an Arenado trade, and there was another report earlier this week that this is my point, actually. Perfect. Great transition. This is my point. A week ago, there was an update that in a report by multiple massive nationwide writers and journalists that said that the Red Sox were the only team left in Nolan Arenado. And if they didn't accept a deal or Arenado didn't waive his no trade to go to Boston, then he was staying in St. Louis because that is the only team left. Would you take a guess at what the update was on Tuesday? It was that the Tigers and Astros may still be players. Hilarious, right? That is exactly my point with the Bregman stuff. Just because a report happens on one day doesn't mean it has to be true going forward. Stuff can change like that. So like I have been, again, vocal about how I'm not huge on Arenado at this point in his career. I think he's got some back issues that have really affected his swing. I don't think he has very much power anymore. Would he be an upgrade? Yes. Could you get him for maybe cheap? I have no clue, but I would imagine the Tigers would only do so for cheap. I don't love trading prospects for him where he's at in his career, but if it's not any of the blue chip high end guys and he's a 3-win player for the next couple of years, then so be it. That would be a great addition, and I'd have no issue with that in the lineup. But I think the upside is with Bregman, and in that case, you don't have to give up minor leaguers to bring him in either. So that is why I tend to lean Bregman over Arenado. I also just think he's a better player currently, just straight up. And I'm not debating careers, just right now on January 10th, 2025. So we'll see what happens with that. But like, I don't know. I can't imagine the Tigers are in Arenado. That seems like a weird fit, but we'll see what the update is on Monday when it's now 8 teams that are all back in on him, even though last week it was 1 or none. Lastly, we're going to talk Justin Verlander going to the Giants. I think that the frustration from the fan base that has come out because Verlander and Cobb are making the same amount of money is does not compute in my head. I'm not here to tell you that it's ridiculous or you shouldn't feel that way. If you do, you feel however you want to feel about it. I'm not here to get in the way or say that like you're stupid or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying I don't get it. I do not understand where this frustration is coming from. Alex Cobb was better the last time he was healthy than Verlander this past year, whose ERA was over 5. And we were talking about how Alex Cobb was like contemplating retirement at whatever he is, 37, 38 years old. Justin Verlander's 42 and has lost at this point, substantial velocity on the fastball and whatnot. And again, I'll reiterate, had an ERA over 5. Now, Alex Cobb was not healthy last year. He has had injury problems throughout the last 6 or 7 years of his career. But Alex Cobb had a 2.75 ERA. Now, that's 2024. He didn't pitch very much. Even if you scrap that and you go, that's not fair to use, fine. In 2023, he had a 3.87. In 2022, he had a 3.73. In 2021, he had a 3.76. Pretty consistently a high 3 ERA guy. Verlander had a 5.48 ERA this past season in 17 starts, a whip of 1.4. And again, is 41 years old. Turns 42 this year. So like, look, man, I get it. I understand the emotional like attachment and the, ending his career in Detroit. And I totally get it. Okay. I would love Justin Verlander to end his career with the Detroit Tigers. Would love it. That man is my childhood. Okay. I would, it would bring a tear to my eye. But the frustration, and look, if anybody can defy time and go out there and shove this year, it's JV. Okay. This isn't supposed to be slander. I root for the dude always. I would love for him to go to San Francisco and have a 2.5 at 42 years old and get himself a multi-year deal next year at 42, 43. That'd be awesome. But like on paper, there is, in my head, zero reason to be frustrated that we're paying Alex Cobb the same amount as Justin Verlander. One's a first ballot Hall of Famer that almost had a 5.5 ERA at 42 years old, a few years removed from Tommy John. And the other is also close to retirement, but has had a sub-4 for 4 years in a row and is a ground ball pitcher. And like, I don't know. I'm not sure Alex Cobb's worth 15, but I'm sure as heck not sure that Justin Verlander in his current state is worth 15 either. So I don't share the frustration that part of the fan base does here. Okay. Let's go get like Bregman or a big free agent and not a aging guy with an ERA over 5 that's going to be like the 5th man in your rotation. That's not like a needle mover either, right? Like you're talking about either way, you're talking about a 5th man in your rotation. I clearly don't get it. But as I always say, I'm never going to tell anybody else how to be a fan. I think that's all I got. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shots to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Monday as we recap the weekend that is. Appreciate you all. Keep an eye out for Brieske updates. Hopefully that does come and we go to arbitration with nobody this year. If that does happen, we'll talk about it Monday. All right. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.